Hey everybody, Tim Cowell here, 49ers Plus Minus with my co-host, that is Matt Barrows, still deep on the East Coast somewhere, but monitoring all things 49ers. And because we call this like a semi-emergency podcast, where we didn't exactly go running to the microphones after the Deebo Samuel trade to Washington was pulled off. They can't make it official until the start of the year, March 12th, but we all know it's happening. But Barrows, semi-emergency. I don't know. What was your reaction yesterday when you heard it? What's your thoughts now that we all kind of had a night just to kind of think about it, ruminate on it, what this means? It's certainly not unexpected. Maybe the trade was, but the Deebo Samuel's departure. What strikes you about this?
Yeah, I mean, a bit surprised that they were able to trade him. I think we speculated that they might have to cut him because it was clear that they were going to part ways. But the destination and the compensation, I think when the trade first, when Deebo got permission for the trade, you and I had a podcast and we said maybe they get a 5th round pick for him.
Yep.
So that's what it is. It's a 5th round pick, and he's going to Washington, which is one of the teams that we speculated might like Deebo Samuel because of that relationship with Adam Peters, and because I think that he's a really good counterpart for somebody like Terry McLaurin. That's what Deebo Samuel had with Brandon Aiyuk. He has a really good route runner, a good deep threat in McLaurin. You can run that sort of deep game, shallow game that the 49ers did with him. And McLaurin's also good against press coverage. Deebo, no, not so much. But when teams play zone against the Commanders, that's when you have to see him. I will give you credit. I'm not going to say the number, but I asked what was Deebo Samuel's high point weight-wise last season. And it meshes with what you were saying a couple of weeks ago. It got really high in the season, and there may have been reasons for that. Not able to work out because of a pneumonia, not able to work out in full because of the injuries he was dealing with. But that's a concern. And, I think the 49ers had that concern the minute he showed up in Santa Clara in 2019, and it never fully went away. A lot of this is sour grapes. You hear bad things about players after they get moved on because the home team wants to seem like they made the right move here. But that's been a consistent theme since Deebo Samuel became a 49er.
Yeah, and that's why it's you take it as it comes when they're praising him for being in shape, right? That was Shanahan saying, "I've never had a grown man text me pictures of himself shirtless before." This was going into the 2023 season when everyone had conceded 2022. After the great year in 21 was not a great season for him. Like, oh, he's in such great shape. Well, if you have to keep telling everybody he's in great shape, that means he has not been in great shape in the past. And he could be someone who gets into poor shape again. And again, I kept saying it. And I'll just say nobody from the 49ers pushed back on me when I kept saying that I'd heard he was 20 pounds overweight. Nobody said, oh, no, don't, you can't say that because it's not true. Nobody said that. Now, they don't always do that anyway, Barrows, like, that. I mean, sometimes it just goes out there, but I don't think that was untrue in any way. Now, of course, I reported. What can I say? And I noticed the backhanded way you have to praise me on that, Barrow. So you just had to fight your way through to say that I might have gotten something right. But
I led with that.
Okay, I appreciate that. You're right. It does get to be like sour grapes. It does get to be like, we don't like him anyway. But I do think this was something that they had been on some people's minds for a while, that he was not someone who was going to last long term. He doesn't stay in great shape all the time. And if you don't stay in shape all the time, it's easy to get more banged up. It's easier to, to walk, but it's harder to get back in shape every time you get out of shape. As you get older, it's harder and harder. And someone asked me just today, what do I think? Is he going to be great again? I think he could be great again. I think Deebo Samuel showed in that Miami game that he is capable still of doing some things. I just don't think it's going to happen as often. We saw it once last year. Once you get into your late 20s, now he will be into his early 30s in a year, and you're already out of shape once or twice or 3 times or 4 times in your 20s. We all know it. It's harder to do it once you're 30, 31, 32. And that was part of the calculations of the 49ers a couple of years ago, and it's part of the calculations now. Now, Adam Peters knows him well too. He knows all these things. Don't dispute the fact that they could really get something out of him. I think we joked about this before. Is it ironic that he ends up with Jaden Daniels, the quarterback that his buddy Brandon desperately apparently wanted, and pissed off the 49ers by going on his podcast and saying how great Jaden Daniels was. And it was a tweak at the 49ers, maybe a tweak at Brock Purdy. He's the guy doing all that stuff. He's the guy who pissed off the 49ers by saying how Jaden Daniels, how great he is. And it's Deebo Samuel who ends up playing with Jaden Daniels.
Right.
I just think there's a lot of pent up stuff here with a lot of things. But I agree. I thought they would not want the big accelerated cap hit, $31.5 million or whatever the hell the number is. It's a big, big number to take for not having a player. Now, it's not dollars paid. That money's been paid. I understand that. And this cap hit would have been taken at some point. You could spread it out to next year if you do the post-June 1 designation. But they're taking it now. They do have space now, but it's going to mean less room to do other things. And there's no question about that. What's the significance of that, Barrows? In the back of my mind, I'm wondering, are they in some way kind of like lessening their push for this year? I mean, you are taking a big hit for a player you won't have just in order to get rid of them and to get that option bonus off your table. What do you think it says that they're taking this hit now?
Yeah, I would reach that conclusion if they are actively trying to shop Aiyuk as well.
Mm-hmm.
That tells me, this is really a reset season. We're going to try to get younger and, less expensive. I don't think that's going to happen.
That would be an enormous cap. That would be an enormous.
Well, yeah, cap, that, and it's a team. I think that the 49ers would want something big in return, and who's going to give something big in return for a guy who's coming off an ACL? So those two things together. But it does. To answer your question, they had Deebo last year. He didn't do much. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that saying goodbye to him means that they're not gunning for a Super Bowl this year. They think that people are better than him on the team. I mean, Brandon Aiyuk gets hurt. Your initial reaction, if you're just a league observer, is, okay, it's time for Deebo Samuel to shine. That never happened. It was Juwan Jennings who shined. And Juwan Jennings who really clicked with Brock Purdy. The Deebo Purdy connection wasn't happening. And it wasn't for lack of targets, which is Deebo Samuel's claim. The targets from 23 to 24 did not change very much at all. So I think that the 49ers see the future as Jennings, Aiyuk, and Ricky Pearsall. But getting back to what you said earlier about how's Deebo going to be, he was motivated in 2019 when he was a rookie. You had Wes Welker just kind of, dogged, barking at him to keep his weight low. He was a rookie. He didn't have any choice but to do what they asked. And he had a good season. And then he had a great season in 21, which was his contract year. He was engaged from start to finish, had a great spring, was motivated throughout that. And we all know what happened. Since then, it's come and gone. They have a big game against the Cowboys. He steps up and looks really good. They have a big game against the Eagles in 23. He steps up and looks good, but it's not consistent. And so that's the question. Is this trade? Is this desire to prove the 49ers wrong? Is this desire to get back to everybody associating Deebo Samuel with excellent play? Is that enough to sustain a full season? Adam Peters thinks he can do that. 49ers fans, us, we've just seen it so sporadically, and it's gotten less and less. It happened maybe 3 or 4 times in 23. It happened once, twice?
Yep.
In 24. How many times is it going to happen in 25? So that's the question. 2 franchises are betting different things on this. It'll be really interesting to watch from afar. I think the fact that they traded to him to an NFC team is interesting.
Yeah.
Because usually you don't want to trade your top guy, your kind of guy who could be out for revenge. in the conference because he might play them in the playoffs. And the 49ers did that, and we're happy with a 5th-round pick for this guy. And that also has to be motivation for Deebo Samuel. He's saying to himself, they traded me for a 5th. I'm going to prove them wrong this season. Let's just see how long that lasts.
Yeah, and Adam Peters obviously believes in somebody only gave a 5th-round pick, and he's not taking the cap hit, right? Those are 2 other things of interest. You talked to D'Amico Ryan, sure felt like he was interested in Deebo Samuel. Do you think the Texans were the other team involved, and like they couldn't top a 5th-round pick? I guess we're talking 5th round seems about right, but you imagine maybe could they have gotten in there and given up more than a 5th?
Well, it's funny because I asked Adam Peters the same thing, and he did the whole, he's on somebody else's team, I can't talk. Whereas D'Amico Ryans was chatty about it. So, I mean, at that point, maybe, D'Amico knew that they weren't going to go whole hog for Deebo Samuel. No pun intended there, by the way. He did sort of leave a little bit of wiggle room. He said, yes, I'm definitely interested, but, there's contract to think about, this, that, and the other. But yes, I'm always interested in somebody like Deebo Samuel. So I don't know who the other team was. I mean, it sounds like the other teams were the ones that we were speculating about, the Steelers and the Broncos, which was a team that Deebo himself was talking up on a recent podcast. So basically everything that we thought might happen happened, and here we are.
It's been reported by your outlet, The Athletic, and by others that Jonathan Allen's name came up in the Deebo trade. It's a big contract. It's hard to just kind of jam 2 big contracts in there. Both teams would be taking hits. But I'm not surprised that Allen's name was in there. I'm not surprised that the 49ers didn't put him in the trade and didn't, it was tough to assess what that value is in a trade. But how do you evaluate what that meant, what that means? Could they try to go get Jonathan Allen if he gets cut?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the position of need going into this draft, into free agency. And it's a loaded draft at defensive tackle, but you don't want to be dependent on that. You don't know how quickly these guys are going to develop, et cetera. So it'd be nice to have, an anchor. And that's what Jonathan Allen is. I think that would be a really nice pick there. He gives you some strength, some heft that they probably don't have right now. So, that obviously shows what the 49ers are kind of looking at, gives us a little bit of a tip for free agency coming up. I still expect them to go heavily onto the defensive line when the draft begins. That's what the draft, we thought was going to be deep in. That was the position that looked the best in these drills and these measurements. These are the guys that are coming in better than expected in terms of size, arm length, how fast they were in the 40, et cetera, et cetera. The offensive linemen, following the script as well, are looking a lot like guards in some of these measures. And we can talk about that more now or later if you want, but it seems to be kind of confirming what everybody was a little bit worried about, which is there aren't any real slam dunks at offensive tackle in this draft, really in the first round. You might be taking a guy who could end up being a better guard at the end of the day.
Yeah. And the 49ers just don't take guards at 11. Like they just don't. That's not what they do. I see Will Campbell, who's the number 1 rated, is like 32-inch arms or
32 and a half.
Yeah, that's way under what you would normally. What 35 is essentially the number you look for tackles?
Well, 34. You want them to be 34. There were a lot of guys today at 33 and a half. So you can sort of talk yourself into it. I think from 33 and a half, talking yourself into it from 32 and a half, that's a different story. I can't remember. I can't pull it. The name of the Green Bay offensive tackle they took maybe about 10 years ago. Brian might have been his first name. That was his rap at this point in the process. And he ended up being a pretty good pro.
Brian Bulaga, is that his name?
Yes, I think that's what it was. Yeah. But the 49ers are sitting there at number 11. And I don't think you want to take a tweener at number 11. That's my thought. I mean, Armand Membao, another guy who's talked about at tackle. His were at 33.5, and he really crushed a lot of the athletic components today. Great jumper. I mean, he's just a good athlete. And so maybe you forgive that half inch if he has all, quick feet and everything else. He's very strong as well. But yeah, that would be sort of the question mark. Sort of confirmed a lot of the questions about this tackle class.
I just don't see the 49ers using. If they were 20, I could see them doing it.
Yeah.
But not 11. They're going to want. There's going to be a defensive lineman that they want at 11, as opposed to forcing themselves to take a tackle who doesn't have long enough arms at 11. It just feels like that's the way it's going to go. I think they're going to try to trade that pick at some point to see if they can get a defensive end, a defensive tackle. There's some names out there. I don't know, exactly who's going to be available. Maybe it's won't even be publicly known. Who knew Jonathan Allen was for sure going to be out there? They tend not to say it until they do it, but I can see them trying to get somebody. I've been kind of hinting that. I've been suggesting that. I don't know if it's Myles Garrett, Max Crosby, Trey Hendrickson. Those are the three I'm thinking of, but it just feels like that's a move that they could be making because they don't really love what's there at 11. They don't love the tackle. Maybe, Mason Graham is the DT they really want. He's gone. Do they, put a smaller defensive end in there? That tends not to be what they do at the top of the draft. So you any gut feelings just from what you've seen, the measurement seen, what fits for them at 11 right now?
Shamar Stewart is sort of the name that made me say, he's the Texas A&M defensive end. Big guy, long arms. I think they were 35 inches arms. It's going to hold up really well on running downs and caused a lot of pressures at Texas A&M. The big caveat, he's never had more than 1.5 sacks in any season. So he's got all these gifts. And he's disrupting the pocket, but he's not bringing down the quarterback. He's a no-brainer in the mid-20s. At 11, you have to think about it, and that's what makes this draft so interesting. Any name you give me at number 11, realistically, is one that I can poke holes in and sort of cast doubt in. And so I agree with you with your trade down, but I think a lot of people probably want to trade down. Because they're not willing to trade up. Tyler Warren is the one where it's hard to poke any holes in it. The hole for the 49ers is that they already have a tight end right there. And they just got rid of a wide receiver / running back. So my counterpoint to that is that, like Deebo Samuel, Tyler Warren can do a lot of things for you. He can be somebody that lines up in a lot of places. He can be somebody that if you're playing are we going to run out of this personnel group or are we going to pass out of it? He'd be a really nice fit there as well. So that's probably still my draft crush or ideal situation pick. Or if he's still there, he could be the mechanism that you use to trade back to number 20 or so.
Yep, somebody wants him. Part of me thinks that they think they can fill a lot of the Deebo stuff, but with a healthy McCaffrey. In McCaffrey's great year, Deebo was good, but he wasn't 2021 Deebo. That maybe some of that is just you can't have two of those guys on the field and expect max production out of both of them. If McCaffrey is really great, you don't need that much out of that position. You need other things. And another tight end, you go two tights and you threaten the defense that way. Could really open things up for the both passing game and for McCaffrey running the ball. Again, McCaffrey gets hurt, then that's all out the window. That this is all understood. It's all fragile. But part of me wonders if they think I'll throw it out there. I've heard that they don't think they need to get a veteran wide receiver. I would disagree with them. I've heard that they kind of like the guys they got, and I'll tell you the name I've heard: Tariq Owens. That they think he was good in practice squad. I have not seen it for myself. But I've heard that name. My guy, he's still out there. He's like 47 years old now. Chris Conley.
Yeah.
I thought he was going to get more chances last year, obviously with all the injuries they had and the chances they have for a receiver, and they didn't go to him. So that clearly they don't love him, but that's another guy they have. We'll see. I don't think they think they're desperate for a receiver. If I'm them, I would have to get a receiver or two. I have not heard that. I have heard that they think that Ricky Pearsall is going to be fine. They've got guys that they can go to. We'll see if that turns out. And part of this is Juwan Jennings. Maybe some of us think, we'll see if he does that again. But also, I've pointed out he had 960 yards receiving last year, which is more than any year that Deebo had except for one. Like he was productive. He was productive in a way that Deebo was only productive 1 year. So I can get some of this. They just don't think the Deebo loss is a big deal because he didn't do it last year. Doesn't mean he can never do it again, but there just isn't that much to replace from last year because he didn't do it last year and possibly will never do it again. We shall see. But while we're dunking on him, I don't mean to. I've just heard so much stuff that I've reported that they don't think it's a big loss. But he was a great player. This is a great player. All pro player in 2021, saved their season, might have saved the Shanahan Lynch era, right? I mean, it was not looking real good when they were 2-4 in 2021. Any memories? What great moments? What are his best moments that you're going to remember, Barrows?
Well, I'm not sure I've ever covered a 49ers team where one person took over the offense like he did in 2021. Maybe Terrell Owens, speaking of the Owens family, and I'd love to get back to that. Back in 2003 was my first season, and he and Jeff Garcia just gobbled up teams, and we all remember what he did in that playoff game early in 2003 against the New York Giants. He took over the second half of that game, but that's what Deebo did basically the second half of the season. And I'm glad you asked this because people move on from players so quickly nowadays. And I realize that Deebo Samuel had a down season last year, but he was the team in 2021, and he was almost enough to get them to the Super Bowl. They lost that game in LA for a number of reasons. Deebo Samuel was not one of them. He was just as effective then. And that would have been a year where they would have played a non-Chiefs opponent in the Super Bowl. So that is one that got away from them, I think. But Deebo Samuel, here's the other part. I'm at dinner last night. I'm in Brunswick, Maine, about 9 degrees right now. But I'm at dinner last night with my 11-year-old niece who lives in Brooklyn, New York, usually. And that's when I got the news that Deebo Samuel has been traded. So I had to announce to everybody at the table, I have to get into my phone for a little while because Deebo Samuel has been traded. Crestfallen. Deebo has been traded. My other nieces who you met, who live out here, that's their favorite player too. Kids in particular love Deebo Samuel. He's out there before the games. He's throwing the ball to the children. He's a recognizable figure. He's got a one name like Cher or Sting. I mean, he was the face of this team. Very recognizable, especially by people maybe a little bit on the periphery of the team as well. So it's a big loss, and it's very interesting, notable how quickly things change. And there are reasons for that. And some of this is what we discussed early on, Deebo Samuel not being motivated enough, not being consistent enough. And you totally get why the team parted ways. But it is interesting to note just where he was just a few years ago among the fan base and where he is now.
Like Cher or Sting? How old are you, Barrows? My God.
Or some other one name.
Beyonce? How about that one?
Beyonce.
Drake? I mean, not so stylish right now, but there's some others. Cher or Sting? That's good. I like it.
But I was going to go with Madonna.
Another one, a little younger.
All right, well, let me bust you. Yeah. You have given us the aggregation of, there's always one thing we say during the podcast that gets aggregated, which is the 49ers like Tariq Owens, which should have been clear because they kept him on the practice squad all season. And they don't always do that, especially at wide receiver. They like to cycle through those guys just to see what they have. But if they find somebody, they keep him, and they kept him from jump. So I think that's a great call. He's definitely going to be somebody to watch. And I don't think anybody should think that Tariq Owens is starting in week 1, but you want to see him sort of climbing up the ladder a little bit.
He's the guy. Yeah, I think you're going to see in training camp he could be that 5th receiver, going into week 1, 4th receiver. He and Jacob Cowing, I could see battling for position, where you are in a depth chart. This is just from what I've heard. I have not seen that particularly myself. Physically looks like an NFL receiver, but so does Conley, so do other people. But I've just when I've asked, they go, the guy I kind of like. That's what I've heard. And I say I can say it just because I haven't thought that. So I clearly heard it from somebody. And again, not being pushed out as someone who's going to be better than, Ricky Pearsall or be somebody that there's going to funnel the ball to and get 50 catches. Not that, just that they like him. And then I went back and looked, Jesus, he's still on the team. I literally had to do that when I heard that. So let's see. I don't necessarily want that aggregated, but I'm going to write it. So that's why I said it, so people can aggregate it off of what I write.
That's aggregation material. That's cool.
I don't love that, but so it goes. I'll say what I want to remember, or people remember about Deebo Samuel. I just always go back to when you see Kyle walk back into that locker room after games. He doesn't always stop at a locker, but when he does, it's almost always Deebo. It's Purdy sometimes, and that's because Purdy's on the way. But who does he kind of make a beeline to? It's Deebo. There's a connection there. Now, I don't know if it's broken. We'll see. I don't think so. There's something about those two, the wavelength. They got each other. I think it was one way for Kyle to get into the locker room was through Deebo, because obviously Deebo, has been such an important part of that locker, has been such a vital, energy source. We know that the players have always respected the way he plays. And I follow Kyle out from his presser every time and into the locker room. And when he goes, he walks fast, as we know. And when he goes in that door, if he stops, it's for Deebo. It's not, if he keeps walking, sometimes he'll talk to Purdy. But if he stops, it's because he's taking that first stop to Deebo. It's right, as you know, the locker is right there as you come in from the outside. And I just think there was some kind of synchronicity there. I think that was, somebody that Kyle could be imaginative with, could figure out, I need to get the ball to this guy. And we know when they were in trouble in games, Kyle would go to Deebo Samuel. NFC Championship game, right? They're down 17 going into the second half. Who gets the ball back to back when the 49ers get to kickoff? It's Deebo Samuel. That thing, the Deebo-Kyle relationship, the ability to feed off each other is something I'm going to remember. And I've always thought it's a window into Kyle, kind of how he looks at offense. And I'll go to the Super Bowl. He tried to get him the ball 11 times. Now, it's Purdy's throwing the ball, but clearly he was targeted a lot, and it didn't happen. That feels like a breaking point in my mind for some of this building. And then they try to get the ball to Deebo and it doesn't happen. Now you can say that about McCaffrey too, by the way, who fumbles on the opening drive. And that's a turning point in that game. But I think the Deebo thing in the Super Bowl, the Deebo thing from 2021, that these are high moments for the Shanahan era, and then it kind of went down starting with the Super Bowl. It feels like, and it could go back up. I'm not saying it's down forever. I'm just it feels like those two were kind of in this together. This era was those two in a lot of ways, and Deebo helped saved it. So I'll always connect him to Shanahan. I'll always connect him to the first 8 years of the Shanahan era, as even though he wasn't part of the first few years of it. Just kind of the rise of it was Deebo. Was a lot of other players, but man, Deebo was such a huge part of it. So I'll throw that in there. And knowing I'm not going to get aggregated for that part, I'm going to get
it's well said, and it is symbolic of those early Shanahan years. Deebo was the guy that helped get them to the top, and this is a team that's going to look different 2 years from now. They're going to look a lot different than they did in 2019. So this is part of that changeover, and that's what the challenge of this franchise is. They got lucky a couple of times. George Kittle was a lucky pick. Brock Purdy was a lucky pick. So, did you learn from your mistakes? Can you keep making picks like that? That's the only way that this team is going to be as good over the next few years as it's been over the last few years. It's a great point. We should probably end on that. I feel obligated to end on my aggregation from our last podcast, which was about Kyle Shanahan coming to Indianapolis for the first time in 5 years. That was happening, and then he decided he didn't want to go. And I think he felt obligated to go because of the down season and because of the extra time they had this year. But I don't think that he believes, he's a big help there, or his coaches are a big help there. They're better served doing the film study that they do. They come in through the Zooms anyway. So that changed midweek, and it was accurate reporting when we spoke, and it wasn't accurate reporting.
Yeah,
So
some people
it happens. Yeah, aggregate me at your own risk.
Yeah, watch out. Some people get really mad. They were getting mad, and it's like, you can report something accurate, and then somebody changed their mind. What are you going to do? And you didn't say it was happening. You said likely. I think you said that, and it was unique just because he hasn't gone, but clearly he doesn't like to go. I would think it would have been a good sign. Like, hey, I understand that things were rough last year. We got the 11th pick. I will be in person. I'll look people in the eyes. We've heard coaches say that there's value in that. McVay absolutely. The Rams completely don't believe in that at all. The 49ers only partially believe in that because the coaches never show up. But Lynch was there for at least most of it. But I get it. Like, they feel like they can they're going to have their top 30 in. They're going to meet the people that way. They'll go to pro days. Well, maybe Kyle won't go to pro days, but their personnel staff will all go to pro days. I think it would have been a good sign, but maybe Kyle didn't want it to be a sign, right? Kyle hates that sort of stuff, which I appreciate. PR. Oh, look, Kyle cares now. And maybe he didn't want that, but I think it would have been good for him to go and then say it's worthless. Like, go to it, go through it, come back and say, you know what? It would be better if I just stayed. I didn't gain anything. That's what I would have thought he would have done. But I understand. I'm not making this a big deal.
I think he should have shown up just for the special teams workouts, just to spite you, just to say, hey, I do care about special teams.
I'm going to hear about it from him into the future. I guarantee. Although I don't think he has a great high ground to stand on that one, but that's okay. I appreciate the back and forth on that. All right, Barrows, lots of stuff. I'm glad we can bang it out. We might have another podcast this week. We might not, but it's always good to jump on news in a semi-emergency basis. That's our Deebo Samuel traded to Washington semi-emergency podcast, everybody.
Semi-emergency.
Yeah.